rare interview with a man who is practically never on television. All right, I hope you're ready, because our very own Eddie Trunk is going to be hanging with the one and only Neil Peart. Hey, I'm VH1 Classic's Lynn Hoffman, and I am so psyched to bring you Hangin' With Neil Peart. Now, the media-shy Rush drummer made an extremely rare on-camera appearance at our studio. So cool. And that interview is coming up for you in just a moment. Neil stepped on our set to discuss his fourth published book called Roadshow. Landscape with Drums, a concert tour by motorcycle. Roadshow is a well-crafted adventure describing Neil's motorcycle journeys between each show during Rush's R30 tour. Now, the book is also loaded with anecdotes and past stories of Neil's other tours and adventures. During this special Hangin' With, you're going to discover the real Neil Peart and find out just how endearing he really is. You know those labels of Neil being shy and arrogant and eccentric? All lies, I tell you. Neil is so kind and intelligent and well-spoken, and you know what? He's just plain cool. Here now is Eddie Trunk hanging with Neil Peart.
So, Neil, thanks so much for coming by VH1 Classic.
Thank you.
It's great to see you here and have the opportunity to talk to you. And before we get into anything, I have to get into the really pressing, heavy-hitting question right at the top of the interview.
Oh, no.
Please establish once and for all, to all your fans watching, the correct pronunciation of your last name.
Oh, okay, it's Peart.
It's Peart. Thank you.
Longy.
You've heard it pronounced every way I know because it's in your book. You talk about it.
Since I was a little kid, yeah, school teachers and other kids and that, and my whole family is kind of the cross to bear of having an old English Anglo-Saxon name like that.
It's actually a very funny moment in the book Roadshow, which you're here to talk about, where you talk about that in the book, and
yeah.
There's a paragraph about it. Getting into this great book, which is your fourth.
Yeah,
it's your fourth book now.
Fourth published one, actually. I wrote a lot before that I didn't publish.
Right, right. When did it first come to your thoughts that, hey, I should really start writing this stuff down? I've had this amazing history of being on the road, spent 30 years in a band, which is unheard of when you really think about it. Not a lot of people stay in a band that long. All these experiences, when did you first start to say, I really should be documenting this?
Yeah, pretty much always. You know, one of my earliest writing attempts was writing short stories with a fictional character who happened to be a musician in a rock band. And because I really wanted to capture the reality of it and try to explain, describe, make it live. And so I had that ambition for the 20 years that I had been working on prose writing, and just kept wanting to do it. And I didn't keep notes all the time because life was so busy. Even on this tour, one of my common laments was life is so full, there's no time to document it, because I was trying to keep written notes, and I even tried using a microcassette recorder for a while to get it all down. But I would have to make myself, you know, get out of bed and write things down, or stop at the roadside on my motorcycle and make notes, and all of that became a conscious effort. And I would still be, oh, I talked to that truck driver today, that was such a great conversation, I want to get that in there, or some stranger that I met in a diner or a gas station, I want that in there, you know. So it was very hard to get all the notes down, but it was something I've always wanted to do.
Now, each book takes you through a different phase in your life and a different way of transportation, actually. One of the first book is about riding a bicycle through Africa, which I can't even imagine what an experience that must have been. From riding a car, you know, driving a car. And of course, this one focuses on riding a BMW motorcycle across America. Talk about each of these journeys. I mean, I imagine writing this stuff down and getting out. You're considered to be a pretty private person. I mean, is this a good way for you to kind of make a connection to your fans in some way?
Well, really, I tend to write for a general reader, and in the case of this book, certainly I was writing for someone who doesn't know anything about Rush or rock or motorcycling or any of that, and I figure it's my job to make it interesting as the other travel writers that I admire. And in every case, it was easier when I'm writing about bicycling in Africa, then it's obviously not a Rush book. And when I'm motorcycling around the U.S. or driving and listening to music, it was about music, but it really wasn't about me as a rock drummer. And this time I used all of the same approaches of my ideal audience, someone who's curious and intelligent about stuff, but again, doesn't necessarily know anything about my preoccupations.
Right.
So I was very clearly writing for that imaginary audience in the same way that songwriting is for an imaginary listener, or even when I'm rehearsing for a tour, it's for an imaginary audience that I'm gearing myself up. So there's that kind of, it's an ideal sense, but it's also based on what I would expect from because I love reading travel books myself and other people's experiences. And I'd consciously tried fiction writing early on and tried all different kinds of writing to see what was my voice, what I wanted to do. And travel writing just became the natural thing. When I was traveling through the world by whatever means, on 2 wheels or 4 or on foot even, I'd be looking around, how would I put this in words? Became one of my early writing an exercise. It's a great exercise for a writer when you feel something. How would I express this? You know, how would I put this into words? So as I mentioned briefly earlier, I did a lot of travel writing before I published anything, which was a nice luxury to have and one I didn't have in music. You have to do your growing up in public.
Right.
It was a nice thing that I wrote for 20 years before I published anything. So I kept writing books, and I would just print a few copies for my friends that or the people I traveled with, and just knowing that I wasn't ready yet. And then finally with The Masked Rider, I felt here's something I could live with, and that was the first one to get published.
Right.
Coming up, Rush's masterpiece. It's all when we return with Hangin' with Neil Peart. Hey, welcome back to Hangin' with Neil Peart. We hope you've been enjoying this rare conversation between Eddie Trunk and the greatest living rock drummer. Now, of course, I've already mentioned to you how extraordinary it is to have him in studio, and I just know the crew was loving every minute of it when Neil was here. And I also know that my brother Greg, who is also a drummer, is watching this program right now. So, hey, bro, hope you're enjoying it. Neil came in not only to talk music with Eddie, but also to chat about his new book, Roadshow. Landscape with Drums, a concert tour by motorcycle. Neil details his motorcycle travels from show to show during Rush's R30 tour. Roadshow is well written and enjoyable from the moment you first read the introduction. And it's also Neil's 4th published book, and it's available in stores right now. Eddie and Neil get more into Roadshow, and we're going to enjoy the music video to Rush's most recognizable hit ever. But first, what happens if Neil gets a flat tire riding his bike to the show? Well, let's find out what happens, shall we?
So, Neil, reading the book Roadshow, and what a vivid detail it is of life on the road, life with your partners in Rush, with Geddy and Alex, and how you travel. You have a bus, but you keep your bike on it, and you take everyone through that process, because I thought that was really interesting. And I wonder if Geddy and Alex ever get worried, like, there's bad weather, is this guy going to show up? Did he blow a tire?
Which of us do you think is always early?
You're always early. You beat the bus.
Yeah, in fact, because of traveling that way, when I used to travel by bicycle, for example, I'd have to be ready for a flat tire, you know, any number of things that can go wrong. And similarly, that's why I always have a riding partner with me.
Right.
Usually I like traveling alone, but in this case, there's a responsibility there. So I have to know, okay, if I have a problem with my bike, I can say to the partner, give me your bike, I got to get to the show. You take care of it.
Got an appointment with 20,000 people.
But with my riding partners who are helping with the navigating and so on, I tell them, look, if I'm not an hour early, I'm late. And I like to get there in the afternoon because I do maintenance on the bike and clean myself up. So the bus for me really becomes a home. I sleep on the bus. After the show, we just leave, go park in a truck stop or a rest area. I sleep on the bus and then wake up in the morning, unload the bike, and ride. So I can be off, you know, any number of different routes, and especially a day off too. We can go, you know, amazing distances. And towards the end of the tour, I started collecting national parks on the East Coast and made it my mission, because when we got out west, there's so many great roads and so much space and so much beautiful scenery that there's never a worry about where to go today. But in the East, of course, it's more densely populated, and I've ridden all of those roads by bicycle and by motorcycle a lot of times, so it's hard to find adventure. I guess that's the missing part, something to get excited about. So I conceived the notion of visiting all the national parks from Dry Tortugas in Florida off of Key West all the way up to Acadia in Maine. And in one 2-day period, I wanted to get Mammoth Cave National Park, Shenandoah, and the Great Smoky Mountains. I had to ride like 830 miles in 2 days to get them. But I had this mission, and it's inside the book, the passport stamps that you get in each of the parks. Yeah. So that became I called it my spirit quest, you know, for the East Coast tour. And sure enough, it gave me something to do. But on the last ride down from Acadia was down to play in New Jersey, and it was pouring rain and coming down I-95 with all weekend holiday traffic in August. And I was in the shower that night thinking, you know, of all the missions you come up with in your life, that was about the stupidest. And then another part of my brain says, oh yeah, but it was that or go crazy.
Right.
So,
tell me about your approach and how writing these books. Everyone knows you are the lyricist in Rush. It's somewhat of a unique situation in that you're the drummer and you also write all the lyrics. How has being a lyricist, have any of these books inspired lyrics on Rush albums?
Interestingly, yeah, they have. From the two previous books, Ghost Rider, there were a lot of little images that I came up, like Vapor Trails, the title came from an accidental image in the book Ghost Rider, where I was talking about memory, and I just said, you know, all these, and I was traveling through the West, and where the Pony Express was, and where Ernest Hemingway shot himself in Idaho, and where the Mormons had trekked through, and so many people had died, or the Trail of Tears of the Indians being driven west, and all of this seemed like on the Trail of Ghosts. I had that image in my mind, and hence the title Ghost Rider too. But I made the comparison that all these people have disappeared like vapor trails, and became the title. And a lot of images in the book came out, and in traveling music written since that time, and in Roadshow, there are a lot of little things that I get preoccupied with, noticing and thinking about, that inevitably inform the lyrics in the same way, because I'm interested in and preoccupied about them. So yes, I absolutely have found that.
Welcome back once again to Hangin' with Neil Peart. You know, it's truly great to discover just how cool and very normal Neil really is. I mean, the poor guy's been called eccentric his entire life, and as we're all finding out right now, that's just not the case at all. Neil discusses that very misconception of himself and many other topics in his latest book, Roadshow. Landscape with Drums, a concert tour by motorcycle. Neil's fourth published book is a revealing depiction of his travels on his motorcycle between gigs during Rush's R30 tour. The book is available in stores now, and let me tell you, it's a great read, written by a great man. Right now, let's return to Hangin' with Neil Peart as Eddie asked Neil to finish something that his bandmates Alex and Geddy started.
So Neil, as I read your new book, Roadshow, I was surprised at how in-depth you got into some of the things that go on the road with Rush. You really reveal a side of you, and there's a, you know, being considered a private guy, someone who hasn't done interviews much, there's a lot in this book, so it's almost, in a way, as a fan, well, maybe I haven't seen 50 magazine interviews with Neil, but I could buy these books and learn a lot. Was that something that you were conscious of doing?
Yeah, it's a very good point. And I guess I'm both private and shy. And one of the things I want to express in the book is why, you know, I do keep to myself, and where if the other guys are doing a meet and greet, I'm not there, not because I'm miserable, but because I'm uncomfortable with that kind of attention. You know, I just kind of wilt like a little
You've never
rabbit.
been a guy that was okay with the whole type of thing, right?
I just get embarrassed, and then I feel bad because people think I'm striking an attitude, but in fact it's just a natural kind of, you know, just feeling uncomfortable. So one thing I really did want to express in the book is kind of why all that is, and share the reality of touring life, and not to take away the glamour, because I understand that, but to make it less of a fantasy, I guess, and more of a real life job, and make you realize that you can be up there, and I might be in pain, I might be feeling sick, and, you know, I might have cracked calluses and blisters on my hands, and it might be a bad day for me, but I'm still, you know, at work just like anybody else doing the job. So those are some of the elements certainly that I wanted to express, and, you know, why I'm kind of a retiring person is just a natural shyness that sometimes people who aren't shy don't understand those who are. And I remember being in school, the shy kids, oh, they're stuck up, or she's conceited, you know, when in fact they were just like me, kind of shrinking from attention.
Right. There's an interesting quote in the book, too, that you say about that, where you talk about the fan reaction to you and how many people love what you do, and you actually have a line in the book where you say something like, you know what, I really just hit things with sticks. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, yeah, that's really, when it comes down to it, what's my job is as primal as can be. I just hit things with sticks, really. That's the way I look at it.
You talk about the aches and pains of being a drummer and the physical aspect of it. Off camera, actually, I heard you talking about the physical aspect of actually riding a bike that long and the feeling it does to your body. But, you know, a lot of Rush fans got real scared around 1989 when you first started to say, I don't think I want to do too much touring anymore. And here we are now 17 years later, and huge tours the last couple, actually. You know, and now I know the way this book wraps up, actually, you're like, well, it's a little bit of a question mark as to if I want to keep playing live.
Right, well, but I do make the joke in there that, well, I've been quitting since 1989, and here's 17 years later, it's still going, so I wouldn't rule it out, but it's, as I think the book describes pretty well, it is grueling, and I make it interesting for myself by putting adventure into it, by doing the motorcycling part of it, and traveling around America and Europe, and all of that enriches my life so much more, where touring is really, at best, doing the same thing really well again and again and again. So for me, it's less rewarding. And one thing I remark in the book, too, it's nice to work on a book that lasts, where a show, even the best show of the tour, which the front cover shows one of those, which was Red Rocks Outside Denver, was what I call a magic show, where everything just came out so effortlessly, and we were smiling, and the audience was smiling and all that. But it's gone. You know, that's when I'm driving away on the bus, I feel kind of a disappointment, like, okay, that was wonderful and the most sublime expression of what I do in front of an audience, but it's gone.
So, Neil, before we let you go, I have to ask you if you'd be so kind. We have Getty and Alex, who were here not too long ago, around the time of the R30 DVD, actually. They were nice enough to sign what is still one of my all-time favorite Rush albums, Permanent Waves. And I wonder if you would be so kind as to grab a Sharpie retractable there.
What color?
The color of your... We don't have the black that Getty
Royal
and Alex
purple.
used. And if you would add your signature and complete the trio for our Wall of Fame, we'd greatly appreciate that. Good luck with the book, Neil, Roadshow. It's a great read. It's a great read about your life and everything to experience on the road, and also a great rock and roll story as well.
All right.
So thank you so much. It's been an honor to talk to you.
Well, I think I can speak for all of us here at VH1 Classic, especially for Eddie Trunk, our senior editor Brendan, and our producer Jay, that this was one of the biggest days for us here on set at VH1 Classic. And we were so lucky to get the chance to get to understand and talk to one of rock's most reluctant and respected musicians ever. And you know something? We found out that Neil is just a regular guy who just happens to be one hell of a drummer. Wouldn't you agree? All right, guys, thanks so much for joining us. I'm Lynn Hoffman, and we'll see you next time.